Welcome into the Leadership Sandbox. Hey, friends, have you ever met that one person that, whatever the area or arena of which you've met them, you just like strike up that connection? It's like that kindred spirit. That is what today's guest is for me. Kendall Peterson is someone that I have had in my circle through training that I've done with a client of mine for several years now. And she would be what I would call a recovering demoralized middle manager. And she has applied the tools of the sandbox in such a way that it has transformed her team. And she is an early learning manager for the Head Start program of the Quinault Indian Nation. And Kendall is my guest today, and we're talking all things hats. We're talking about switch hats, not values, because you can't lead what you're avoiding. And today I'm excited that Kendall's joining me because she's going to bring her perspective, boots on the ground, someone who's applied the hats in many conversations and texted me or called me to go, hey, Tam, how do I get to go have this conversation and we talk about the hats. And I'm so excited that Kendall is joining me. So Kendall, welcome to the Sandbox.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
We are excited to have you. So tell us a little bit about your journey. Just you are not Quinault, right?
Right.
You're working for the nation, which has its own element of kind of cool factor, but also struggle and challenge, right?
Mhm.
And you have grown as a manager exponentially. So just tell us a little bit about your journey, because I know that's going to bless somebody that's listening.
Awesome. Yeah. I have been with the Quinault Nation for 9 years now as the early learning manager, and I oversee a Head Start, early Head Start, and childcare programming for our Tohola site and our Queet site. I have more than 20 years experience working with programming that helps support children and families. I'm super passionate about that work, and so I get to continue that on through my work with the Quinault Nation. We're about building strong programming and high quality programming. And yeah, like you mentioned, it has been quite the journey, and there are some complexities that come along with supervising and leading in spaces that you might not be familiar with, or you're trying to learn the culture of the community and navigating your way through that. And I know for me, where the hats have just been super beneficial is like when we're talking about our values and belief systems and whatnot. For me, it is very, very, very important for my value and for my kindness value and my loving value and my love for children and families value. It's very important for me that those values are transparent, even when I get the opportunity to wear the leadership hat, or if I get to put the boss hat on. It's very important for me, and where the hats have been helpful is in identifying to the people that I'm speaking to in the moment that, hey, I am shifting, right? I am shifting from out of my mentor hat, which is what I really prefer, to where I love growing people and I love developing staff and seeing families and children grow. And sometimes, when I take that hat off, for me, it's very beneficial to identify to the person I'm communicating with which role that I'm in with them. That way, for me, I can stay clear and I can still stay grounded in my values and belief systems and still be able to give feedback to them in a way that they receive it in whichever hat that I'm wearing. So if I'm shifting to the director hat, or oftentimes I'll say the compliance hat, even, because that is the times where I do have to have, I get to have conversations with staff when things are, compliance, safety of the children is our number one concern. And so I make it clear, like, hey, I'm wearing my compliance hat. I have my clipboard and my checklist out right this second. And I think that it also lets people put their guard down, because then they don't see you as coming at them sideways in any way, and that you are just here to provide the feedback to them. And
Yeah.
so for me, that's been very helpful.
So I love that. And you went like from 0 to 60 in 2.2 seconds, and we're down that path. And I want to come back to just bringing in the listeners to the hats. And so we have the values hat, right? Which we live in our core values all the time. I mean, they are foundational to who we are as
Right.
people. Right. And then we have that, depending on our role, right? We might have the leader hat, Yes. And then we have the boss hat that can go on. You actually added some others as well, which I thought was in the compliance hat. That's good. The mentor hat. What I love is that you actually expanded the hats to fit your team, to fit the scenario so that, you're not just friend all the time. You're letting people know who you are so that when you get to drop a just do it, it's time to get it done. And we'll talk about it afterwards. They're already engaged with you, is what I hear you saying in that. And I think that's really cool and very powerful. And what I'm curious about with the hats, and before we even really like how you started utilizing them, before you got the hats, before you adopted this tool in your leadership style, tell me what it was like managing people for you.
Oh man, I wish I could draw you a picture right now, but when you think about leadership, like to me, I picture like an organizational flow chart, like a very like top-down situation, right? And I think the best way that I can describe this, that before I gained some of these leadership tools, I would say that my leadership was more described as like this Tasmanian devil style squiggle. There was no organization to it. It was very much, lack of a better term, running around like a chicken with its head cut off. I was not being clear. I was not giving expectations, was not following through, which is very important in setting expectations and paths forward for folks and providing those growth opportunities. And so I think that I just had a very scattered approach, because for me, where I was getting hung up and where I was getting caught up is I don't want to lose. I want them to still see my values. I want them to still see that I'm a loving person and a caring person and a kind person, and that I have compassion and empathy, and that I'm about personal growth. Like, I didn't want that to get lost. And so I was really trying to protect those values. But in turn, what did end up happening is there is a lack of clarity. There was some burnout taking place because things were like, communication was not taking place in a direct way and in a clear way, to where staff were using their own interpretations of what might be taking place and just kind of going with it. And so I have absolutely seen the impacts that it can have when you're leading in a way that isn't clear to your team. Absolutely. And I would say
Yeah.
that if I were to go back and that's one of those things. It's like, you can clear your path forward. Like, and when I look back 9 years ago, I wish I had known that going in, right? Like, it's one of those, I wish I had known then what I know now, because I think that I could have avoided probably 3 or 4 or 5, maybe, years of just that scattered leadership, or attempt at leadership, I guess.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you for sharing that. What were the conversations like then, and how are they different now? Because you went through a long, about a year long, a, almost a year long program with me. I mean, and you've been through several trainings, but the one specifically focused on your leadership and when we introduced the hats and how to use those. Tell me a little bit about what were the conversations like before, especially because I know you struggled hanging out in the friend zone a lot,
Hmm.
right? One, because of the dynamic of the environment that you're in, right? I mean, just with the community that you serve, it's clear that there is definitely, we like to be friends. It's harder to take that stand of leader, right? And to put on the leader hat or even the boss hat. So, what
Yeah.
were your conversations like, especially when you needed to course correct a behavior or something?
I think that for the majority, I think I wore that avoider hat that we were talking about at the beginning. I think that that was the hat that was the most prominent. Like, I think even more so than like the friend hat. I would absolutely avoid those conversations, and especially, like, I think about like impacts of being the avoider is the ones where there was negative behaviors that were impacting the entire team and bringing that down the morale of the entire team, and things that like multiple team members would bring to my attention as like maybe another person displaying behaviors that were not serving a purpose in our program. And then I just avoided it and kind of ignored it or turned my blind eye and just said like, well, I just can't. Like, that was just kind of my mindset is, I just can't. And I kind of turned everything into a small potato, if you will. I'm like, that's a small potato. I'm not dealing with that today. And really, what that did is, one, it implied to the team that those negative behaviors that were no longer serving us were acceptable. And it also set a very low bar for what our expectation is. And like we mentioned, like, I supervise a program that serves children birth through 5 years old, which safety and quality is very important, especially to those families who are dropping those kiddos off. And so it was also impacting the safety and the quality of the programming that we were providing. And so I think that the timing of, you know, Tammy entering my world was perfect, because it was one of those things where, like, it was either, for me, it was step up, or there was going to be potential long lasting impacts to this programming. And where that bothered me is, like I'd mentioned, like, one of my core values is, like, I believe in programs that support children and families. And so I found myself in a little bit of turmoil. And so, like, when this information was being presented to me, I can honestly say I was ready for it. I was needing it. I was ready to drink from the cup, if you will. And I can honestly say that it did not take long to start to have those conversations, and then to start seeing the impacts of what happens when I was holding myself accountable to being an actual leader.
Yeah, that's great. It was a fun process to watch you go through because you weren't leading with clarity. One, you didn't have it because I remember you didn't even know really how to ask for it. It was just you were moving so fast to keep the program going that you didn't have the one. Not only did you not have the clarity, you weren't leading others with the clarity, because you can't lead something you don't have. Meaning, if I don't have clarity, then I can't lead with clarity. That's going to be really a big struggle bus. And you're right. I remember that it was a bold conversation of, is Kendall gonna survive this? Like, can Kendall come through this as the leader that we see her as the manager that we know she can be? And you have put in the work. And now I'll ask you today, the what's different piece of it is, from a leading with clarity perspective, how has that helped your life, your personal life and your work life?
Well, I know it's a lot calmer and less stressful, like, and that goes without saying that every single day in our programming, there's something new, or there's something that needs to be done. There's not a minute where something can't be filled with a task. And so that in itself seems stressful, but where I can say I don't feel so scattered and so stressed personally. Um, I also, one of the things that I take a lot of pride in is, like, my team. I can see it in my team. I have a team who's happy to come to work. I have a team that has worked for our program. We have a lot of long-time staff in our program.
Yeah.
And I have staff that I've talked to who will share back, like, this is the best it's ever been, as far as, like, communication, and as far as staff feeling heard and being in a space where they can provide input without having to feel negatively about that. And so I will say, like, the scatteredness and that running around like a chicken with its head cut off, some days can be like that, but it's not because of how I'm leading necessarily. I can also say that the hats really do, and like I mentioned at the beginning, for me, like, making sure that people can see my values in the work that I do, the hats have really helped in terms of me staying consistent and stay and, like, being able to still have my values and belief systems, but at the same time leading in a way that is respectful towards the community, and leading in a way that is with integrity. And so I guess the hats, like, they ground you, right? Like, they're like an anchor almost, in a tool that sets the path, and it does provide that clarity to the people that you're leading.
Well, and what I love about what you just said is you understand, and yay, you understand what your core values are. You did the work to identify those core values. So you know where you operate from, right? And as you know, we've talked about it, the values is foundational. We all have our core values, and we always we're hardwired with the core to know these are the things that I respond to. These are the things I'm going to react to. These are the things I'm challenged with, but they're rooted in my value system.
Yep.
And when we identify that, then everything else becomes, I'm not going to say easy, but I think it definitely runs more smoothly for us when we can say, am I reacting to something in this conversation right now? And my values tell me that it's because for me, it's usually if someone comes in like something against my integrity or self-respect or my family, those are my three at the core of who I am. And it's really hard for me when something comes out. So I go, "Oh, I'm having a reaction. Is my values right now."
Right.
However, for you, what then, and I know, so you identified your values and we talked about you struggled early on with you wore the friend hat all the time. You wanted people to
Mhm.
like you. And part of that is the culture. I don't think people quite understand, and maybe not all of our listeners are going to understand. You work for a sovereign Indian nation. You are not Indian, right?
Mm.
You're not native and you're not Quinault. And there is a judgment that comes with that. And you've worked to build the trust. You've worked to um, be not only trusted but respected in your role for the last 9 years, and that's a lot. That says a lot. And so understanding, and I remember we had this conversation. It's hard to not want to go in to be the friend because you don't want to rock the boat, because
Right.
it could have a bigger ripple effect and a bigger impact in the work, right? Across
Yep.
the nation, not just your department. It has a bigger reach. And yet, what did you find? Let's share this. What did you find when you talk about leading with clarity and you had to set aside the friend hat? What did you find? What did you struggle with about that? But then what was the freedom? Because that's that sanity part, right? That's that piece that you're switching hats, right? Still the values, right? I'm not getting rid of the values to keep the friend. I'm
Right.
actually going to move the friend hat to grab something else. What was that shift for you?
Well, for me, I think that one of the things that's like an immediate notice is that it really helps staff to understand that there was a boundary that existed. Like
Mm,
there was no
so good.
boundary. There was no boundary at that point. And so making it clear to them, making it clear to staff. And one of the things, like the values, one of the things for me, I communicate my values consistently, whether it be through how we're navigating through a situation or helping a family out or how we approach our program services. And so I feel that I walk my talk in terms of what the values I bring to the table because I believe that people can actually see them. So for me, that friend piece was a really important piece in coming and working in a place where very few people within the community knew who I was, because I did need to show that I am the person for this work. I am the best person for this job. I do go hard for Quinault children and families and the community. Um, and so that piece was important, but I think that how it helped is when you define and put up that boundary, you're taking care of your own wellness. Like
Yeah.
I'd mentioned, like I was just a scattered mess running around crazy, really trying to hold it together, and also knowing that I do have the potential and the ability to help impact children, families, my staff, the nation as a whole, and then not really knowing how to get on path to where I could actually, again, walk my talk and actually do the work to make those things happen. And so I think that it's the biggest significant piece is just like setting a boundary, because staff just didn't understand. They only saw me as a friend. And so the times, and there have been times, and it was I don't want to say painless. There was definitely bumps and bruises when it came to, I've given feedback in the situation where I'm wearing the friend hat and it did not go well. Like not
Mm,
making that clear defined line and boundary in that space and letting them know that I was giving them feedback as the director of the program in that moment. Um, they were perceiving me as a friend. And if I, put the shoe on the other foot, so to speak, like, and if I stand on their hill, I could actually see where they were coming from. I would be very offended too if one of my friends, who has only ever been friendly with me, then pulled me into this space and tried to provide me with feedback in a way that is more boss like, if I was used
right.
to, receiving them as a friend. And so I had to apologize to some
Mm,
people that I don't even know that I even wanted to, right? Like at that point, like I didn't want to, but when I came to the realization that like, hey, I didn't communicate that in the best way and it really wasn't fair for them that they perceived me as a friend all of that time, and then I gave them a course correction as a boss, and that was just mind-blowing for them. And coming to the place where I recognize that, like that's a huge aha moment, and that's that growth that they're talking about. That is growth, when you
Yeah.
recognize how you could have done things better in the past and that sort of thing and apply it.
Yeah, that's great. And that certainly helped with you and with the team. I am curious, though, from the perspective of, and we'll just kind of bring this in because we're going to have a part two to this conversation. But how was it with new hires? So once you adopted, like I know how to navigate the hats. It brings clarity to communication. It shifts the energy in the moment. Someone can be frustrated because they're looking to you to be friend, but you can say, "Hold on a minute. I'm not wearing my friend hat. I've got my leader hat on, or I've got my boss hat on. Or right now, as I've said, I've got my just do it hat because we need to get this done and we'll talk about it later." When you brought in new people, what was different? What did you notice was different just in your training and onboarding and in the development of them on the team with your hats? And what would the team say is different?
I would say that the team the team would say that I in those instances when new staff are coming in, that instead of wearing that friend hat immediately, that I more have the leader slash mentor hat on, where I am like the very first conversations that I have with folks is like, welcome to early learning. Let me share our expectations with you. Right. Like, and let's go through our list of expectations and let me ask you if you have any questions or if you need any clarity on what these expectations are, what they may look like. And I just explained to people, these are our non-negotiables. And in having those very clear expectations and having that conversation at the forefront and just straight out the gate, I think it does set a precedence with our new staff. And I can also feel that because like I said, we've had a lot of staff who's been with me, and I'm like, God bless them through my leadership journey, and I'm like, they were with me when I did not have it together in that regard, and I'm so grateful that they've given me the opportunity and the grace, like, and understanding and recognizing that there's some growth, that I've had growth,
Right.
and that they've given me the opportunity still with very little resistance to practice it, so that
Mhm.
they're very gracious in that regard.
Well, I'm gonna pause you real quick right there because I remember the conversation where we talked about how you set your team up for the change that was coming. You couldn't just go in and start claiming, "I'm wearing these hats now, deal with it, people." There was
Yeah.
a setup that you did, and you let people know there's change coming. Here's what I've learned. Here's what I'm applying. Here's what you're gonna see. I remember having that conversation with you.
Yes, that did happen. That did. It
How
did.
was that for the team
Well,
and you?
I think that I honestly, though I don't think that they expected that from me. I don't think they were anticipating that. I think that they were anticipating just things just going the way that they were and just everybody kind of having to deal with it, I guess. And I think that it was a pleasant surprise, though. Like, in having the conversation, I think everybody was ready for me to step up. I think that those things that we talk about, the burnout, the lack of clarity and the communication, and people just kind of being little negative tornadoes because they were allowed to do that in this building, like those types of things, I think that everybody was ready for me to step up. And so I think there was a shock factor that was like, oh, wow, I can't believe she's willing to hold herself to this and she's going to go through the motions to try to make it happen. But then I think that there was a ton of relief too, because they're like, it's about dang time, like
Right,
type of
right.
a situation. And so that's kind of how that went. And my staff, I have a great team. They're very supportive of me. I'm very supportive of them. That door does swing both ways for us. And so I do have to take the moment to like celebrate them, because I do believe that I wouldn't, well, I shouldn't say that. I'm not sure how it would have gone trying to grow my own leadership had they not been so gracious and understanding. And with that too, because where I think it's huge is just owning it. Like I had to own it with them, right? Like I had to take that moment and say, hey, I get to own all of my flaws to you. Let me explain to you the ways that I have not failed, but where I could have done things differently, and where we have established some patterns of behavior that are probably a result of my lack of clarity, right? Like, and probably a result of the way that I'm leading you. And so I need to own those things. And so there was a big moment of me apologizing to them for having, that been the way. And then just saying, hey, I need you to also recognize that this is not going to happen overnight for me. Like this is going to be a practice that is going to take a while, and it will be a forever practicing situation for me because I was committed to the growth. Like, and I own that to them. And I think that they have seen that. And that's where, again, you get your respect from your team. Like I walked my talk. I owned it to them that it wasn't working. And then we started doing things differently. And is it perfect all of the time? No, but they do give me that grace because they see me trying.
Well, that's also the beauty of how we lead with clarity. It's not about perfect, right? Be better, not perfect. You know that.
Right.
And if we're taking a step forward every day, 1% better, to be more clear, so that not only are we bringing sanity, or we're modeling what that looks like, and that clarity is so important. Clarity is kindness, I love that one too. So the switching, owning your values, honoring that, speaking from that, declaring, yeah, I haven't been my best, but wow, I've got some new tools. And for you, I remember talking through with you and hearing you after you got the tool of the hats of, I'm going to put on this hat now, I'm going to put on that. And it's the physicality of changing the hat. Even if you don't have a physical hat, it's that motion that helps people. And that bringing clarity, and people will be gracious. And I think that's just what I want the listeners to take away. It's like, it's not about being perfect. It is about being better. It's about acknowledging what is, what was, and what we're going to do now, and involving them in that process and owning it. I'm making new change because I see where I haven't been the best that I could be for you and for us and for the future. So, and for the people that we serve, right? For the kids, for the families, And so I just celebrate you for that, because it's been a great journey to watch. And I am excited that we're going to actually have a part 2 to this conversation, because we've definitely talked about why the values, owning your values and talking about that, and then having a hat to switch into. The values don't change, it's foundational. But we're going to be talking up next about who put the hat on you to begin with, right? We anchor and hold on to stories that I have to, and I'm using have to intentionally with air quotes, of course, I have to be this way or else. And culturally, that's been a pretty big one, I think, in your work environment too. But I want to talk about that next up in our part 2. But Kendall, thank you so much for joining me today about switching hats, not values. I am excited for what's to come and celebrate the transformation that you've made. What would you say for your last and final to the listeners on switch hats, not values, leading with clarity?
I mean, I'm just going to drive it home with what you just said, that naming your hat gives clarity to yourself as to where you are. And then it also gives clarity to others. So especially if you work in a multi-faced environment where you can be changing hats like from 1 minute to the next. Like this morning, I went from family advocate to getting to be the director, right? Like I was working with a family and then went into immediate management mode. And so I think that the hats give clarity, and so that it's really important. It's a useful tool to utilize with your teams.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for joining us in the sandbox today, everyone. We'll see you next time for our next episode with Kendall, all about those hats still, but really about who put it on you. And I just thank you for taking time in the sandbox today. I want you to like, share, comment, reach out to me with any questions that you have about how you can get some more teaching and training on the hats and how to use them with your team, even with your family. It works, because I've done it with a teenager a time or two, right? Like, I get to be boss mode sometimes at home, but I really just want to be mom. So then there's that. But thanks for joining me in the sandbox. I'm glad that you took the time. I know that the investment of time will pay off for you in the long run. And I know that third-party affirmations go a long way. So please share this with someone that you too know can benefit from the story that we've shared in the sandbox today. Make it a great day, and God bless.